Kevin Cash has always been kind of a bozo to me.
What would this segment be without some kind of fiasco in Major League Baseball?
Why is that your first reaction to the hiring of Steve Nash? Why is that the first thing that popped into your head? Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of the Slightly Sideways podcast, episode 8. I'm your host, Koenig, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Corbin. Say hello to the people, Corbin.
I like turtles.
Okay. Before we get into tonight's show, we do like to inform the listeners at home of the alcoholic beverage we are drinking during the program tonight. On my end, I have a beer making an encore appearance in a Gumby like the claymation. I have a Gumby pint glass. I'm going with Ziggy Zoggy Summer Lager out of Silver City Brewing up here in Bremerton, Washington. Corbin, what are you drinking tonight during the show?
I am going to go with a seltzer today. So I normally drink beer, but I've been drinking a lot of beer lately, and just a little change up, if you will. I'm going with the Truly. I've got I think it's a tropical pack. The one I have now in my hand is pineapple, but I also have, other tropical flavors.
Okay.
So not too bad. Decent alcohol content, and just trying to cut down on the carbs.
And if you want something a little bit different that we're going to be doing for the show is now at the end for people that maybe haven't tried the beers or the drinks that we're drinking, we're now going to be giving an official score. So after we put down several of these, we're going to be kind of rating our drinks out of 5. So stay tuned to the end of the show to kind of figure out what we think of what we're having tonight. Before we get into tonight's topic, we do want to plug our social medias. If you haven't already, give us a follow on Twitter at Slightly Sideway. If you're on Facebook, you can like our page at Slightly Sideways Podcast. If you want to catch up on any episodes you may have missed, you can find our show on Spotify at Slightly Sideways Podcast. And if you're on YouTube, our episodes are now finally rolling out to YouTube, complete with visual references. We do have exclusive content coming to that channel very soon as well. Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell for all notifications so you don't miss a single episode, and of course, like the video for the YouTube algorithm so this content can be pushed to a larger audience. Corbin, what do we have on tap for the people during the show tonight?
So tonight we have a very, very special episode. We are going to be doing a full episode on the National Football League. Tonight we're going to be going into our predictions for each team from each division. We're going to tell you how we think they're going to fall in place as far as their overall record. For each division, we are going to go into the top story of each division preseason. So we'll kind of pick what we think is the biggest topic out of that division before this season is kicked off and going. Technically, the season is already kicked off. Yesterday, the Chiefs had matched up with the Houston Texans at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, where the Chiefs had taken care of business. In my opinion, not the most exciting games in the world. Koenig, you have a little opinion on the game yesterday?
I watched the game pretty much from beginning to end, and granted, I think about halfway through, I ended up turning on the Sounders game because it was kind of a little bit of a snooze fest. Texans did score the first touchdown of the game, and then Kansas City was very much in control of that game from, I'd say, about the second quarter on, and then Houston put some points up in garbage time to make it look like it was closer than it really was. But we'll kind of get into each of those teams in our show tonight. We'll kind of see what we think of the Chiefs, what we think of the Texans. There's going to be 2 big topics on the show tonight. So if you're a football head, Corbin said this is a full show for the NFL. He's absolutely right. The whole program is going to be dedicated to the National Football League. The unknown tonight is going to be about the NFL as well. So if you're into the unknown, I will be taking the reins on that. And that will be NFL themed as well in honor of the beginning of the NFL season.
Awesome. So we're just going to go ahead and get right into it. We're going to go division by division from each conference. We're going to tell who the team is, and we're going to give our records on where we think they're going to lie. We're going to give our reasoning why, see if we disagree on any teams here, and then we'll have an overall big picture for that division for the fans out there. Give them our opinions on what we think the big storylines are before this season is officially kicking off with all the teams. We'll go ahead and start here with the AFC East. So we'll start with the Buffalo Bills. Koenig, this is a team that's got a lot of hype that's carrying over from last year. where do you have the Buffalo Bills as far as a record for this upcoming season?
So the Buffalo Bills, not really the most exciting team. Everyone seems to rave about Josh Allen. They're coming off of a playoff season as well. So I don't have my heights set incredibly high on the Buffalo Bills. I do have them finishing at 9-7 this season.
Okay, 9-7. On my end here, I have them at 10-6. I do think that they've got an underrated defense. I'm not the biggest Josh Allen fan. I haven't been even when he was playing college at Wyoming. I just thought he was more of a chucker, and teams just fell in love with this guy's arm because he could throw the ball far. I still think accuracy is a big problem with his game, but we've seen before where you don't have to have the most stellar quarterback to have success. I think the defense can carry them to a 10-6 record this year.
It's interesting that you mentioned Wyoming because actually back when I was in grad school, going to grad school at San Diego State University, Josh Allen was still at Wyoming. And so we had several games where we actually got to see him in a college football environment. He was a talented player, but it's not as though to say that Josh Allen was like blowing everybody away. Like, I thought he was going to be good. I didn't necessarily envision him as being an NFL caliber starting quarterback when he was playing for the Wyoming Cowboys. Like you said, they definitely just fell in love with his ability to just launch the ball, and that he can.
So 10-6 on my end for the Bills. Koenig says 9-7. Koenig, how about the Miami Dolphins?
Miami Dolphins, it'll be interesting because you do have that quarterback controversy. I mean, and maybe it's not even a controversy at this point, but they are going to give the ball to Ryan Fitzpatrick to start the season. How long does Fitzmagic. How long is he going to keep the job before, Tua Tagovailoa takes over? I think he's obviously the heir apparent down in Miami. I have them at 7-9.
That's exactly where I have the Dolphins too. And I think I'm maybe overestimating on the Dolphins. The reason being is they were purposely trying to lose games last year, and the first half of the season they were easily doing that. And then they made the change to Fitzmagic, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and they started winning games. And a lot of Dolphin fans, maybe, who were trying to get that number one pick, didn't quite see the value in that. But I think that their guy all along was Tua Tagovailoa, who they ended up getting at number 5. But I think the Dolphins are not as bad as people think they are, and they're a team that can creep up on you. So I think 7-9, still not like lighting the world on fire, but I think they'll be pretty competitive.
All right, so we agree on the Dolphins. Corbin, you're the Jets fan. Where do you have the Jets going into this season?
I haven't been high on the Jets in a long, long time. Even when they went to back-to-back AFC championships with Mark the Butt Fumble Sanchez, I still just didn't have extreme confidence in them. The issue with the Jets is they have a great young quarterback in Sam Darnold, but they just still don't have receiving weapons for him. The defense, we just got rid of Jamal Adams, who was our best defensive player. Every year, I usually I say 4-12 every year. They get one win for every letter in their name for the Jets. I do think that Sam Darnold will be good enough at moments to win them a couple extra games. So I think that they can go 6-10, but nowhere near the playoffs. No way.
So before I give my record prediction, I just want to let the people at home know Corbin and I wanted to keep our predictions separate before we started recording the program because we didn't want our opinions to kind of influence each other. And so we prepared all of our notes and all of our records and everything like that completely separately. I agree on all points with Corbin, and believe it or not, I have the Jets at 6-10. This year.
Okay, all right, okay.
It shows, Corbin and I obviously very dialed in with what's going on in the AFC East. I'm a big Patriot fan. He's a big Jets fan. So it's no surprise that we're agreeing. Even the Bills, I have at 9-7. He had at 10-6. So we're pretty much on the same page so far. And like Corbin said, obviously, Le'Veon Bell, sure, but there are no receiving options. There's just nobody there for Darnold to throw the ball to. So I think 6-10 is being overly generous. I think it could easily be worse than that, but we
definitely.
We do have the Jets at 6-10.
All right, perfect. And that leaves the evil empire, the New England Patriots. Koenig, you are obviously the Patriots lover. Koenig and I were actually fortunate to go to a Patriots home game in Foxborough for Koenig's bachelor party, which
Yes.
I'll admit it was a cool experience. I hate the team, but to get to see a winning team like that in a packed stadium was pretty cool for a change.
It was honestly one of the coolest things I've ever done. Like, I'll never forget that. If you're watching the YouTube video, we'll throw some photos up from our time in Foxborough. It was a total rainy day. It's super stormy. Like, we got rained on pretty much the majority of the day, but it was awesome. It was something that I had always dreamed of going to Gillette, and seeing Tom play in person is the first time I got to see Brady play in person. But what a amazing experience, and to be able to do that with my best friend, obviously was I'll never forget that. But anyways, getting back into the preview, I have the Patriots at 11-5, and that might even be on the generous side. I was even thinking of possibly 10-6. There's a lot of question marks going into this season, and we will get to that in just a little bit. But Corbin, before we get into that story, where do you have the Patriots?
I also have the Patriots at 11-5.
That's crazy.
I actually think it could be higher. They're gonna beat the Dolphins twice. They're gonna beat the Jets twice. I think they're probably gonna split with the Bills,
like always.
So right there, they'll be 5-1. I think it's gonna take Cam Newton a little bit to get things settled. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Patriots started off, say, like 2-2, 3-3, just a little bit of a stumble out of the gate, just for Cam Newton to get his rhythm. And so long as Cam Newton stays healthy, that defense is awfully, awfully good. If they can get decent production out of their quarterback position, I think 11-5 is more than doable for the Patriots.
Like Corbin was just mentioning there, Cam Newton really out of the AFC East is that big story going into 2020. I think when Cam is healthy, he's proven to be one of the top quarterbacks in the league. The big question for me going into this season is the Patriots receiving core, because obviously you have Julian Edelman. Everyone knows what Julian Edelman is all about. N'Keal Harry is going into his sophomore campaign. He missed like half of last season with an injury. So it'll be interesting to see what N'Keal Harry out of Arizona State does with the whole season. But then after that, you got Ryan Izzo at tight end. And granted, the Patriot running backs really factor into the Patriots passing game with, their screenplay and with, the play action and stuff like that. You got Sony Michel and Rex Burkhead. This is going to be a really interesting season for the Patriots because you have a system that Tom Brady had, which I think was very much pocket passing, short passes, screens, and slants over the middle. That's really what you got in a Tom Brady system. I think what you're going to see this year from Josh McDaniels, the offensive coordinator, and Cam Newton is a much different style of offense that is really tailored to Cam Newton's athleticism. You have someone who's mobile enough to extend plays that you didn't have for the last 20 years in New England. So, Corbin, talking on the topic of Cam Newton, what are kind of your expectations for him going into the season?
It's all going to depend on health. And when he's healthy, he's proven to be a very, very good quarterback in the league. And I know there's the question marks as far as like receiving targets. Does he have what's needed to be successful? But I think Bill Belichick, he finds a way. He finds these players that just fit. He gets it right. I'm going to trust that he's going to continue to get it right because he has for so long. If he stays healthy, I would not bet against Cam Newton. I kind of want him to do well so we can dog your boy Brady, but we'll get to that when we get to the NFC South when we talk about the Buccaneers.
And it's kind of interesting that you mentioned this, Belichick finds a way, because here just recently, it was like 3 or 4 days ago, the Patriots actually signed Division III wide receiver Mason Kinsey out of Berry College, okay? So,
man,
you talk about finding these diamonds in the rough. Remember the name Mason Kinsey. I don't know if he'll make the team or if he'll have any significant playing time, but I think Belichick has shown that he's able to go out and find these special players that not a whole lot of other teams are targeting. But we will move on from the AFC East. We do want to go into the AFC North, and we'll save the obvious choice for last, I think. Uh, I'll start with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers are kind of an interesting team because you got an aging Ben Roethlisberger. I think he's like 38 years old now, Corbin, if that's right.
He's old.
He's old, okay? But I do have the Pittsburgh Steelers at 8-8 this year.
I have them just slightly above that, just because they played well last year. When they played poorly for the first half of the season, and people were counting them out and saying, this Steelers team is no good. And I mean, they were playing without Big Ben, so I'm going to cut them some slack. They're getting Big Ben back. Do I think Big Ben is the player that he used to be? No way, especially coming off a season where he missed the entire year. I don't think they're going to light the world on fire as far as a lights out record, especially having to play a team like the Ravens in division. And even the Browns are not that terrible anymore. I'm going to say 9-7. Does that get them into the playoffs? Maybe as a wild card, but they're going to be right on that fringe again, just kind of like they were last year.
Speaking of the Cleveland Browns, they're not necessarily a premier team in the NFL, but you're talking about a team that consistently used to finish with like 3-win seasons, 2-win seasons. So going into this year, Cleveland, I have them at 9-7, just above the Steelers. I think that Cleveland is really starting to get their pieces together. Baker Mayfield with OBJ even. That team is going to slowly start to kind of put the pieces together and figure it out. But in a very tough division, I think that's what kind of caps their potential in terms of record. So I will have Cleveland at 9-7 this year.
I have Cleveland just a tick down. I have them at 8-8. I'm not sold on Baker Mayfield. He definitely digressed in his sophomore season from his rookie year, where he got all the hype and everybody was, ready to crown him the next greatest thing in football. He had better weapons, albeit a lot more drama. I mean, anytime you add OBJ to your team, there's going to be drama. But they didn't play well. They didn't perform well last year. There's nothing that they've done in the offseason that really lights my hair on fire to be like, yeah, this team is playoff bound now. They have a lot of talent offensively to be good, but until I see consistency from this team, I'm going to say 8-8. I think it's going to be just not good enough to get into the playoffs.
Moving into the next team in the AFC North, we will talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati, coming off of a 2-win season under their new head coach. Obviously, Joe Burrow, the number 1 pick out of Louisiana State University, and we'll kind of go into that issue here momentarily. I know that the Bengals kind of loaded up on defense. That defense was terrible last year, so they went out and they got a few more starting players in free agency. Obviously, AJ Green is coming back after missing all of last season with an ankle injury. So how far can the Bengals improve? They still have a lot of questions, I think, at wide receiver, even with AJ Green back. And they went out and got T. Higgins out of Clemson at 33 overall. I don't think necessarily that's enough to make the Bengals a legitimate threat of any kind. I have the Bengals at 3 wins and 13 losses.
I have it exactly the same. Wow. 3-13. People are saying like, oh, usually when a team drafts a quarterback number 1 overall, they're usually good to win an extra 2 to 3 games from what they did the previous year. I am not a believer in Joe Burrow, and Joe Burrow honestly bothers the hell out of me. Obviously, he put up huge numbers last year, right? Everybody was just so on this guy's junk that I feel like people overlooked the situation. And to go into that briefly, his junior year at LSU, he had to transfer away from Ohio State because he wasn't good enough to play at Ohio State, which, okay, that happens, right? Like you get in a bad system, or there's a guy ahead of you and you're just not going to play. Okay, he left. But the fact of the matter is he wasn't good enough to play at Ohio State. Otherwise, he would have played. So he transfers to LSU, where Ed Orgeron has taken over this program, and they don't really have a quarterback. Like, they haven't had a quarterback since Jamarcus Russell. And you could argue if he's a true quarterback or not. He just chucked the ball up.
Yeah.
They had Joseph Brady, who came into the LSU program, who pretty much transformed the offense in the passing game. He had arguably 4 All-American wide receivers slash tight ends on his team. He had a high NFL pick in Clyde Edwards-Helaire as his running back, as another resource. He had one of the best offensive lines in college football. Yes, he slung the ball, but he was throwing to A++ talent. And you see this all the time, especially with like quarterbacks coming out of USC, where they're like, "Oh, Mark Sanchez was such a great USC quarterback."
Oh.
No, he was okay. He just had tremendous talent surrounding him. His junior year, and this not Mark Sanchez, his junior year for Burrow, when Brady wasn't there and they hadn't really established their identity, he was okay. Nobody went into his senior year saying, "Oh, look out for Joe Burrow. This guy's going to be a Heisman Trophy candidate. Like, this guy's the real deal. He's going to get picked in the first round." Nobody was talking about that at all. So I'm very, 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 very cautious on Joe Burrow. And I think he's cocky as all hell. And maybe he deserves to be a little bit because he is a national champion. You can't take that away from him. But the guy they win the national championship and he's like kicking back, smoking a cigar in the locker room. Like he's like Rico Suave. Like I'm Mr. Made in the Shade. I'm so wonderful. There's just something about him that just irks me. And I'm so ready for him to get to the Bengals. Dude, you're about to be on one of the worst teams in football. You have one of the worst offensive lines in football. Dude, you're going to have to read these NFL coverages. You're not going to have these bizarre spread offenses that you had at LSU. I think he's in for a rude awakening. And not to be like vindictive, but I kind of hope the guy gets his ass kicked. I know that like people are, they don't want to say that. I want to see this guy do poorly because honestly, I think he's a selfish prick who thinks he's like Mr. Cool, Mr. Hot Shit, and he needs a reality check, and I think he's going to get it.
Yeah, he doesn't have nearly the talent that he had at LSU. And not to say that, NFL talent is not as good as his college talent. That's not what I'm saying. It's all about relativity, right? The NFL wide receivers that he has on his team are relatively less impactful than the wide receivers league-wide in the NFL. And so when you're talking about weapons, guys that can beat NFL coverages and NFL defenses, he doesn't have that same level of versatility, I think, that he did have at LSU. And he does play in a tough division. You're going to have to play the Ravens twice. You're going to have to play the Browns twice. You're going to have to play the Steelers twice. Yeah. That's tough. So 3-13. Hey, we're right on the money. We agree on that. We will go into the last team in the AFC North, the Baltimore Ravens. And I will say, as a Patriots fan, I hate to admit this, I love watching the Ravens play. And I think they're arrogant, and I think they're cocky, and they have a swagger to them. Their team photos, and everyone's posing and, taking their photo and whatnot. And that part kind of irritates me because I think it's a little unnecessary at times. But the way that the Ravens play the game, they're so exciting to watch, obviously led by Lamar Jackson. I mean, the best quarterback that we have seen in my eyes since Michael Vick in terms of athleticism. The guy is phenomenal. But going into this season, I do have the Ravens at 13-3.
Ooh, okay.
I'm high on the Ravens.
The Ravens are a very good team, and there's no denying that. I have them at 12-4. I think they're going to easily win that division. With the Ravens, though, I hold some reserve because they definitely tore the regular season on fire last year, and they got the first round bye, but then they ran into the Titans, who just seemed to just dismember them at home in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that their offense isn't a gimmick offense that worked for a short period of time, a la the Los Angeles Rams when they went to the Super Bowl.
Right.
To have success on a defense, you have to figure out just enough to create issues on the offensive side. And the Titans definitely did that in that playoff game. So I'm curious to see if NFL teams are going to figure out the Titans did something here that nobody else did the entire season. We may have something here that helps contain Lamar Jackson or helps him force errors. It remains to be seen. It could have been a total one-off. It could have been that the Ravens just laid an egg, and that happens all the time. I don't think they're going to be like a 15-1 team that some crazy people out there think, but they'll be good.
That's too much.
They'll be good. I think 12-4 is going to be a very solid record, and they'll contend for a first round bye and possibly the best record in the NFL. So that's where I got the Ravens at.
Moving right along, we will get into the AFC South. I'll start with the Colts. The Colts are kind of an interesting team. You have Leonard on defense. He's probably, in my eyes, he's their best defensive player. I think he's a phenomenal up-and-coming talent in that system. You have Phillip Rivers changing teams, now quarterbacking in Indy, which is very bizarre. I never thought I'd see Phillip Rivers play for another team. But I have the Colts at 9-7.
I actually just changed this right now because I was on the fence when I first made the decision, and I actually lowered it. I did have it at 9-7, and I made the change right before you said that. So okay. I don't want you to think that your answer changed that for me. There's nothing about the Colts where I'm like, oh man, like I'm really worried about the Colts there. Like, Phillip Rivers really scares me. Like, not at this stage in his career. They have a very good coach, and I think that for what they have, they do a good enough job, but I think they're just a very average team. I think 8-8, 500. There'll be a game, maybe 2 games out of the playoffs, but 8-8 for the Colts.
It'll be interesting to see how that system changes with a less mobile quarterback, because obviously Andrew Luck, when he was still playing, was able to do a little bit more, and extend plays and get T.Y. Hilton open downfield so he can make some plays. You're not going to have as much of that with Phillip Rivers, so it'll be interesting to see what the Colts do. We will move into the next team, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and we were talking about this a little bit before the show about Jacksonville. Seemingly, all of their good players are on the first ticket out of Jacksonville. Like, they cannot wait to get out of that place.
They play like 2 seasons and are just banging on the door to get out. I mean, it's like I don't know something is in the water in Jacksonville, or who knows, but players do not want to stay there.
That is a fact. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, for me, are going to be one of those bottom of the barrel teams in the league this year. I have the Jaguars at 3-13.
Well, you actually have them more favorably than I do. I have the Jaguars at 2-14.
Wow.
There's just nothing there. It's a skeleton. You're just constantly losing talent. You had Jalen Ramsey, who is arguably one of the best defensive players in the league, that was kicking down the door to get out of there. They never have consistency at the quarterback position. Correct me if I'm wrong. They're still going with Gardner Minshew.
Yeah.
And no knock on Gardner Minshew. I actually like his story coming out of Washington State. Didn't really have any offers or opportunity. He was like a 1-year starter, and then boom, is in the NFL. So, and he looks like Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But like, you mean to tell me you're going to win games consistently with Gardner Minshew with no weapons for him to have success? Leonard Fournette is not on that team anymore.
Yep.
It's just like, I just don't know how they're going to score any points to win any games.
Yeah.
So I just don't see how this can't end in a disastrous season for the Jags.
Going right along into the Tennessee Titans. Titans are an interesting team. Obviously, they did very well against the Ravens in the playoffs. You had the whole Ryan Tannehill experience, which was interesting. They kind of laid an egg at Arrowhead to the eventual Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. But with Derrick Henry also, I really am favorable on the Tennessee Titans. I do think that they will replicate some of that success from late last season with Tannehill under center. I have the Titans at 10-6.
I'm not too far off. I have them at 9-7, just a tick down. I don't believe in Tannehill. I don't think he's bad, but he's okay. But that's his role. His role is not to go out there and throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. His role is you're going to hand the ball off to Derrick Henry, and when you need to, you're going to play action and just move the ball. Our defense is good enough that we don't have to score an incredible amount of points to win games. And it worked in the playoffs last year. They beat the Patriots, and then they went on to beat the Ravens, arguably 2 of the best teams in the NFL, minus the Chiefs, who won the Super Bowl. I think their defense is good enough to get them over the 500 mark, but in the NFL, if you don't have a premium quarterback, it's really, really hard to get those double-digit wins. And I think that they could sneak in as a wild card, much like they did last year. 9-7 for the Titans. That's where I have them.
And the last team in kind of our feature story here in the AFC South, we have the 0-1 now Houston Texans coming off of, I think, kind of an I don't think Houston necessarily played that well at Arrowhead. You know, it is still early on in the season, but I'm a believer in Deshaun Watson. I do think he's fantastic. There are other concerns that I do have, and we will get to those in a minute. But I have the Texans finishing at 11-5 and winning the AFC South.
Oh my, 11-5?
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is where we're gonna strongly disagree here. I have the Texans at 7-9.
Wow.
I think they're gonna finish under 500. Obviously, they're gonna miss the playoffs. Hopefully, I mean, if they get in the playoffs at 7-9, something screwy.
So you have the Titans winning the AFC South then?
Yes.
Wow.
Followed by the Colts, followed by the Texans.
Wow.
Yeah, Titans, Colts, Texans, and then the Jaguars way in the back.
Way in the back.
My reasoning is this. The organization is dysfunctional. You have a head coach, Bill O'Brien, who is also the general manager, which is just, in my opinion, a recipe for disaster. Like, you're literally giving this guy the entire power. And to be a general manager of a professional team is a 24-hour job in itself. And you're the head coach. On top of that, what do you do in the offseason? Arguably, your best player, as far as if you just look at talent at the position, they get rid of their best player in DeAndre Hopkins, and they send him to Arizona for at the time, third string David Johnson. David Johnson was performing so poorly in Arizona that they couldn't even play him. Even after his success the previous years, he was so bad that they had to bring in Kenyon Drake from the Dolphins and upgrade their second and third string backs and pretty much just buried David Johnson on the depth chart. And the Cardinals were like, oh, crap, we just gave this guy a big contract and it's obviously not paying out. This guy has lost a pep in his step. But Bill O'Brien trades arguably a top 3 receiver in the league. Depending on who you ask, some people think he's the best receiver in the league for a third string worn down running back who clearly on tape didn't have it anymore. I think Deshaun Watson is a very fine player. I wouldn't go so far to say that he's this like unbelievable stud yet. I think he could get there, but you take away a huge building block on your offense and say, hey, Will Fuller, you're going to be our number one. And I think Fuller is a good player, but
he's not a number 1 caliber receiver, though. Let's be honest.
Exactly. Very true. On a middle tier team, which I think the Texans are, he's a good number 2. On a really good team, he's a 2 or a 3. So you get rid of your best receiver to bring in a washed up running back who you automatically plug into as your starting running back. The team has digressed massively just in the offseason in that alone. And to say that they're going to go and be this really good team, playoff team, division winning team, I mean, no way. The game yesterday against the Chiefs, I think nobody had expectations that they would win. But there was never a time in the game where you were like, oh, the Texans might have a chance here. Even when they had a short lead in the beginning of the game, there was no hope for that team. And when they got down by 17 points, it was over. I mean, there's nothing for me to get excited about for this Houston team. I think Bill O'Brien is going to get fired after this season once they don't make the playoffs. And I think it's a miracle that they got Deshaun Watson to sign a long-term deal, because the hype was that he might go somewhere else and not sign a long-term deal. So the fact that they signed him for a 4-year, $160 million extension, the people of Houston have to just be bowing down to Deshaun Watson for doing them a huge solid.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Deshaun Watson getting the 4-year, $160 million contract, I think in Bill O'Brien's eyes, I think they knew that they didn't have the money to sign DeAndre Hopkins to a long-term deal. And I think that's ultimately why they let him walk. And
that's the best value that you can get, a washed-up running back from Arizona.
Well,
and
yeah, the return value was terrible. I'll agree with that.
Their contracts, when the deal was done, their contracts were identical. So it wasn't like, hey, this is a good chance to move Hopkins and we'll save money. So we'll get rid of Hopkins' big deal that he currently has, and we'll bring in somebody who's not making as much. And if it doesn't work out, okay, we'll cut this guy and we have money to deal with so we can go out and get new players. No, the money of both the players was identical. So it wasn't even like a smart financial move. I just don't see it. I don't see it. I know that Cardinal fans, people thought it was a hoax. When that deal happened, I remember when that deal happened. I was driving home from work. I had the local radio on, and the professional radio hosts were like, "This can't be. This cannot be right." Or we're missing details. Like there's parts of this deal that are not in here. And then of course it was confirmed, and people were pissing their pants in excitement at what a steal that was.
Yeah, I remember people at the time calling for Bill O'Brien's job after that trade. Like everyone was like, "Yeah."
I don't know how he didn't get fired. If I was the GM, I would have been like, "You've clearly gone insane, and that's unfortunate for you. You can no longer have any part in this football team. Go back to Penn State. Goodbye."
Yeah. So we will transition into a new division, and we will talk about the AFC West. We will start with Drew Lock's Denver Broncos. I really don't have a whole lot to talk about here. It looks like Von Miller, who just had surgery today, is going to be out for the entire season. You have Drew Lock at quarterback, and I have the Broncos as one of the worst teams in football this year. I have them at 2-14.
That's exactly where I have them. I so wanted to put them at 1-15. They have Melvin Gordon, who I do think is a good player when he's healthy. But yeah, to say that Drew Lock and his band of misfit no receivers is going to put up points for that team. Your absolute best player, Von Miller, is out for the year. There's, you lose your leader, your heart and soul on your defense. I just don't. There's just, oh man, they're going to be vying with the Jaguars for that 2-14. It's going to be a battle for the worst team for that number 1 overall pick. I have Bronco fans that are friends of mine. Hopefully I'm wrong, but it's not going to be very high in the mile high.
I see what you did there. So we will move on now to the Los Angeles Chargers, the kind of stepbrother of Los Angeles, I guess you could say.
The team that Los Angeles never wanted and still does not want.
Yeah, and now San Diego doesn't want him either. The Los Angeles Chargers, they've got Tyrod Taylor at quarterback. Maybe Justin Herbert gets a start at some point during the season. I really don't have a whole lot of faith in the Chargers. I have them at 8-8.
I have them right there too. Just because they're going to beat up on teams like the Raiders and the Broncos, I'm hoping that they're going to go minimum 3-1, if not 4-0 in those games. That means they just got to go 4-8 the rest of the season to break 500. They have a good defense, even though Derwin James has a season-ending injury, which is very, very unfortunate. But Joey Bosa on that defensive side. Tyrod Taylor, say what you will about him. He's been a starter for a long time in the league with the Bills. He's a veteran. He knows how not to lose games, which sometimes is what you need. Sometimes you don't need a quarterback to go out and win the game for you, i.e. Mark Sanchez with the New York Jets when they went to back-to-back AFC Championship games. But you've got Keenan Allen, who's one of the best receivers in the league, in my opinion. So he'll have options to throw to. I can see them being, okay, 8-8. They're not going to be world beaters, but the bottom of that division is so poor that 8-8, I think, is very reasonable.
Moving on to the Las Vegas Raiders at their new home in Las Vegas. Viva Las Vegas. This might surprise you, Corbin. I know you're not high on the Las Vegas Raiders. I have the Raiders at 9-7 this year, ahead of the Chargers.
Yikes. Okay, well, I'm going to disagree with you there. I have the Raiders at 5-11. They stockpiled on picks the last couple of years, and they loaded up on picks to improve their team. And I do think that the team, as long as they can keep their talent together and shit doesn't hit the fan, I think in maybe a couple of years that they could be a 9-7 team. But I still think they're going to have a lot of growing pains. I don't think that Derek Carr is the guy, and I think everybody kind of knows it. John Gruden knows it, but John Gruden wanted to move up the draft Kyler Murray 2 years ago in the draft, who the Cardinals ended up drafting number 1, and the Cardinals just would not budge. So clearly, John Gruden does not see Derek Carr as the quarterback of the future for the Raiders. New city, that's going to have an effect. You're going to have these NFL players who are now in this city where let's play a game, let's go out, let's party, let's gamble. There's going to be distractions. And, you like to think that these grown ass adults are going to like take responsibility and be good, outstanding citizens. But let's get real. It's the NFL and players fuck up all the time. And what better place to mess up in than Las Vegas?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a rough first year for the Vegas Raiders. They're going to be 5-11. However, I do think in a couple years, if their talent progresses, I think they could be a good team, but not yet.
Okay. And moving on to the last team in the AFC West, the defending Super Bowl champions, the 1-0 Kansas City Chiefs. And what else can you say about the Kansas City Chiefs? The feature story for this division, obviously Patrick Mahomes inking that 10-year, $503 million contract, making him the highest paid player ever in the league history.
Yep.
So what more can you say about the Chiefs? I feel like if anything, the Chiefs got even better this offseason. Corbin, I don't know if you'd agree with that or not, but I have the Chiefs at 13-3.
I have the Chiefs one notch above you, 14-2. Clearly the best team in the NFL, and I think most people would tell you that if they were speaking the truth. Their offense last year was absolutely incredible. It seemed like their one weak spot was their running game, and they go out and they draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire from LSU, who had an absolutely amazing first game, 137 yards rushing, a touchdown, and he fit right in. It was very evident that he fits right into this team. This is a team, honestly, I can see this team. It's so hard to go 16-0. And it's kind of dumb to say that a team's going to go 16-0 because so few teams have done it. Somebody's going to beat them along the way. And then I can see them being a 14-win team going into the last week of the season and having that number one seed locked up. And then they rest Mahomes, they rest their players. And then, they lose that final game. You see it all the time.
Yeah.
So I would not be surprised if they were 14-1 going into their final week and just saying, screw it. Like, we're going to concede this because it doesn't matter. And how they'll get that second loss.
And we won't go too much into the nuts and bolts on this, but going back to the Patrick Mahomes contract, 10-year deal, $500 million. The Kansas City Chiefs are obviously all in on their young phenom quarterback. Corbin, as a fan of a team that has inked a player to a long-term deal that didn't particularly work out, what are your thoughts on signing Mahomes to a $500 million contract?
So to break down this contract fully, because you say $503 million, that's if he plays the entire contract, they don't cut him, what have you. He's getting guaranteed money of $141 million. So the guy could slip on a banana peel and never play again, and he's got $141 million in his pocket. When he signed the contract, they gave him $63 million. Hey, Mahomes, thanks for signing this $500 million contract. Here's $63 million for doing so.
Wow.
He is the most exciting player in football, in my opinion. As far as, especially at the quarterback position, he can make throws at angles of his arm that you haven't really seen before. And the strength of his arm is absolutely incredible. And not only can he throw the ball deep downfield, but he can throw the ball deep downfield on a rope. It's not like I'm going to chuck it and lob it down there. They're going to go basket catch it and run into the end zone. He could hit these guys on a dime from 50, 60 yards away. Obviously, they win the Super Bowl with Mahomes at quarterback. In order for this to be successful, in my opinion, he needs to win 2, 3, 4 more Super Bowls. It's a $500 million for one player.
A huge investment.
$500 million for somebody who plays a sport for a living. Now, albeit he's a tremendous athlete and what he does, he's incredible at, but we can't be looking back at this. Technically, it's 12 years from now. He's got 2 years left on his current deal, and then the 10 years add on. So it's 12 years from now is when all this money would be paid, if you will. If we come back at this 12 years later and he's got one Super Bowl championship, the one that he won prior to the contract, it's going to be an absolute disaster, especially for Chiefs fans. Whether he gets the Super Bowls and loses them, it's not going to matter. If he doesn't have, from here going forward, if he doesn't have multiple, forget the one that he just won. If he doesn't have multiple championships going forward, I think it's going to be a not so great thing. However, I do think that this team is greatly set up to be good for the next 3 to 4 years. And I would not be surprised if the Chiefs won 2 or 3 championships in the next 3 or 4 years. So as it looks now, forecasted, I think it looks okay.
Fair enough. And I think you're right on the money there with the Mahomes deal. Like you're saying, the Chiefs are investing a huge pot of money into Mahomes. And so now the front office, it's kind of just like a wait and see. It's kind of like, okay, dude, we believe in you. We believe in you $503 million worth. Now you need to go out and uphold your end of the bargain. And sometimes you see this with certain players who get paid. They have a slight regression after they get their big contract. Do I think Mahomes is going to regress? No, I don't. I think he's a phenomenal player, and he loves football, and he loves to play, and he loves to have fun, and obviously he loves to win. And so I don't think he'll necessarily have a regression season, but I think it is something to kind of keep your eye on. Is, okay, now that he landed this long-term contract, it kind of takes some of that pressure off of you. You kind of relax a little bit. You're guaranteed money and all of this stuff. Can he sustain that over a 10-year period? It's going to be very, very difficult. But we finished up the AFC. We will now go into the NFC. And we'll start with kind of the less exciting division in football. We'll start with the NFC East. We'll start with the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys really don't have a whole lot to say about this. You had Dak's situation. He came out in the media with his mental illness and everything. Shout outs to Dak Prescott for, first of all, being open enough to disclose that information. Mental health is such a huge topic these days, it seems like. And Dak Prescott was very forthright about that in his interviews. And so, tip of the cap to Dak for doing that and for saying that and being honest about his situation. And obviously, we hope he makes it through whatever he's dealing with. But the Cowboys, going into the season, they play in kind of a whatever division. I'll have the Cowboys at 9-7 this year.
I am very, very close to that record. I have the Cowboys at 9-6-1.
Why not?
The reason being, I feel like in the last 5 years, we always see at least one tie in a football season. And I don't know if it's something in the water or if it's just been a freaky coincidence, but this division has such parity as far as mediocrity that I could totally see a tie in one of these games in this division. I do think that the Cowboys are the better team in this division. 9-6-1 is actually going to win the division in my prediction here. I think the Cowboys are a decent enough team. I mean, you ask a Cowboy fan, and Cowboy fans are, we're gonna go 14-2 this year and win the Super Bowl. Every year it's the Cowboys, true. Right?
Yeah.
So I don't like the Cowboys, and I never have, and I never will. But I'll say that they are the best team in the NFC East this year. 9-6-1. They're going to do enough to get into the playoffs. How they're going to do in the playoffs always remains to be seen every year from the Cowboys. But 9-6-1, that's my prediction.
So we will go into the next team in the NFC East, the New York Football Giants, and your boy Daniel Jones. I have the New York Football Giants at 8-8. I think Saquon
8-8.
8-8. I'm high on the Giants. Again, bad division. So Saquon Barkley, I think you could argue top 3 running back in the league. I think, in my opinion, he is. Daniel Jones, I think, is making some significant strides since he took over that starting job in New York. And again, I think the division does have a lot to play in it. I think the Eagles are going to be very bad this year. I think the Washington football team is going to be very bad this year also. And so I do think that the Giants do just enough to go 500 this year. I don't know necessarily if that qualifies them for the postseason. Reason being, I think the NFC West is the most competitive division in all of football. We will get into the NFC West in just a second. So I don't think 8-8 actually gets them in the postseason, but I do think that's where they'll finish.
I have the Giants at 6-10.
Okay.
My reasoning is Saquon Barkley is by far their best player, and I don't think anybody can really dispute that. And he's a tremendous talent, but I never like putting stock into a team that their best player is a running back because there's just such a higher chance of injury. If Saquon Barkley goes down, that team could win one game. I mean, it's as simple as that. Yes, Daniel Jones has made strides, but he still doesn't have the weapons on offense. Who's he throwing the ball to? Who's protecting him in front of him? That defense has question marks all along the back end. I think this division is very MERP-ish. That's my term. MERP is my term for like, kind of like I don't really know what to say, but whatever. So I think they can win 6 games. I think they can beat teams like the Washington football team and potentially the Eagles, maybe the Cowboys at home, maybe 6-10. I think is realistic. Again, I don't like to put stock into a team that their entire team is based around a running back.
Fair point. So we will move along right now into the Philadelphia Eagles and Philly. And I know we'll talk about this as we go along. Philly, one of those teams who was in the Super Bowl 3 years ago, and they haven't done anything even remotely resembling a Super Bowl caliber team since then, 3 years ago. I have very limited stock in the Eagles this year, so much so that I have the Eagles finishing at 5-12 this season. Or I'm sorry, math is hard. 5-11 this season.
5-12. Maybe the following season when we go to 17 games.
There you go.
Not quite yet. I'm going to give them more of a favorable spread. I'm going to say they're going to be 8-7-1. And spoiler alert, they're going to tie with the Cowboys.
There you go.
Spoiler alert. I don't know, who knows, home or away. I do think that Carson Wentz is the best quarterback in that division. And Cowboy fans are going to want to shoot me with their shotguns and whatever. I don't care. I think Carson Wentz is the best quarterback. The problem is that he just can't consistently stay healthy. And that's going to be the big question mark. If he does stay healthy, I think he can do enough. He doesn't have a whole lot to work with on offense as far as the running game and receivers. Yes, he's got Alshon Jeffrey, who also seems to kind of be banged up all the time. Zach Ertz is a really good tight end. If they could just, and again, all these records are based on these teams being healthy. And if the Eagles can stay healthy, and especially Carson Wentz, I can definitely see them being technically an above 500 team because they'd go 8-7-1.
All right. And everyone's new favorite, funnest team in the league. We have the Washington football team. And Haskins taking over the job at quarterback for that team. My sights on the Redskins for 2020 are very, very low. If they win 4 games, I'd be shocked. And so I do have them at 4-12. I think even that is generous. There's not a whole lot more to say about the Washington football team. 4-12, that's as high as I'll go. And I think that's generous.
I have them at 3-13. A lot of factors involved here. First is the whole drama with the team. There's, all this scrutiny on the owner, who's maybe not the greatest guy in the world, change the team name. So you've got distractions from the outside coming in. You've got a quarterback who's coming into his sophomore year, and he was not good at all his rookie year. I don't think he's the guy for the future. And I think what they're doing, because obviously Alex Smith is not the guy for the future either. I mean, my goodness, the fact that Alex Smith is still playing football games after his horrendous injury is a miracle in itself. Yes. The guy almost had to have his leg amputated, and he's playing football now.
It's remarkable.
Which is kudos to him, mad respect. The fact that he would even still want to play football after an injury like that is incredible. They have to go with Haskins because you have to make sure. I think they already kind of know that he's not the guy, and they're going to have this second season as confirmation, if you will. Now, who knows? Maybe Haskins comes out and he plays all right, and there's something there, and maybe they can work with that. Maybe they want to go forward with it. I just don't see him as an NFL starter. Could he be a backup on a team? I do think so. I think they're going to soon find out how bad he is. I have him at 3-13. 3-13, I think it's going to be a rough season in Washington. Outside distractions, not much on the field. Sophomore quarterback who doesn't belong as a starter. It's going to get ugly.
So moving into the NFC North now, we'll leave the feature team for last. I'll start with the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota coming off of a playoff season, and with your boy Kirk Cousins at quarterback. One of the more exciting running backs in the league also in Minnesota. Minnesota, I thought long and hard about. I don't know, Corbin, how long this took you to figure out.
Long and hard.
Yeah. But I don't know I don't know how long it took you to figure out where you were going to place the Vikings going into the season. For me, it actually took quite a long time. And even now, I'm not particularly confident in this prediction because the Vikings could have a very, very bad season and they could also have a very, very good season. They're so unpredictable this year. It feels like you just never know what you're going to get out of Minnesota. But I feel okay with some of the other teams in that division. I feel strongly enough about the fact that I think they'll go 10-6.
That's exactly where I have them, 10-6. There is part of me that thinks they can do better than that. And like you mentioned, there's part of me that thinks that they could do worse than that. I think Kirk Cousins is a very serviceable player. I think he's good. He's not great. He's not bad. He's not okay. I think he's good. And he's got weapons on offense that he can go to. The defense can play really, really well at times, which is why I'm encouraged to give them a 10-6 record. The rest of that division, I think the Lions aren't much of a challenge for a team like the Vikings. Even the Bears, who we'll get to here in just a second. The Bears. Really, their only competition, and it kind of seems like it's always their only competition, is the Packers. I could see them 10-6. As far as if that wins the division or not, we're going to have to wait for some soon predictions here. But I like the Vikings. That's a team that I've always liked for the last 2 to 3 years now, and they all right in my book.
They all right. So we will go on to the Detroit Lions. And I know we talked about this briefly before. Matt Patricia going into his second season in Detroit. I'm obviously a big believer in Matt Patricia. He was the defensive coordinator in New England for all those years.
Fuck him.
I think I'm high on Matt
Pencil
Patricia.
Boy.
Yeah.
For people who don't know, this fucking nerd, Matt Patricia, doesn't he have a degree in something like rocket science or some bizarre?
Yes.
This fool is on the sideline. He's got like a pencil, like a golf pencil wedged in his ear the entire time. And I don't even think he uses it. I think he just has it for aesthetics.
Yes.
Nerd.
But Detroit, I'm high on Matt Patricia. I'm not very high on the rest of the team, unfortunately. Matt Stafford's still at the helm there. It feels like Matt Stafford's been in the league for 20 years now. I have the Lions finishing at 6-10. I could easily see that being 5-11. So at 6-10 is where I have Detroit.
Freaky, man. And you could just tell that we kind of have the same mindset at times, and that's exactly where I have the Lions, 6-10. They have some bright spots. I still think that when Stafford plays well, he is a very good quarterback. I like Galloway as a good receiver. I don't think he always plays as a number one, but when he does play well, he definitely has the ability to be a number one. The defense, which is supposed to be Patricia's strong suit, has not been good.
Yeah.
I think the Jets beat him last year in the first week of the season.
Oh, it was
the Jets
ugly.
put up 40 or 50 points on them. It was that.
And then Detroit came back in week 2 and trounced the Patriots. It was brutal.
So 6-10, like Koenig said, probably favorable. My sister's boyfriend is a Detroit Lions fan, so I'm going to give him a win or two extra from what they probably deserve. I'll say 6-10.
All right. And so speaking of those Bears, I have the Bears. I'm really not high on the Bears. I'm not low on the Bears like I am on other teams that I have no faith in whatsoever. I do think they have, a few really decent players on their team. I have the Bears at 8-8. I think 8-8 is probably their ceiling, unfortunately. I think the Bears could easily have a season that is below 500. Mitch Trubisky at quarterback, he's getting all of the opportunity in the world to prove that he deserves that job, and I still haven't seen it, man. I just haven't seen his ability to be a starter in this league, and so I think that the Bears go as far as Trubisky can take them, and unfortunately for Bears fans, I don't see that being very far because I don't have a whole lot of faith in him.
it's a situation that the Bears put themselves in. They did not position themselves to have anybody else take that starting job unless you wanted to go with Nick Foles. And I know there's people out there, oh, well, Nick Foles led the Eagles to a Super Bowl championship, blah, 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 blah. Like, okay, very small sample size. The guy caught lightning in a bottle. They won a Super Bowl. Congrats to him. But you look at the guy's entire career, Nick Foles has not been a good quarterback. He was an absolute disaster in Jacksonville, albeit he didn't have the greatest opportunity. He was hurt, what have you, lands at the Bears. It's evident that his success at the Eagles was not his true colors. So what do? Do you go with a guy who's a has-been in Foles, or do you have a guy in Trubisky who's still relatively young, who's been the starter for a while, who knows the offense, and just hope and pray that he somehow figures it out this year? I don't think he's going to, and it's kind of like a 48-year-old DJ. Like, dude, if you haven't hit it big yet, you're not going to, so just kind of hang it up, you know?
Yeah.
Well, not to say give up, but, like, I think Trubisky could be a backup in this league. The Bears have a really good defense, but I just don't see them scoring any points on offense.
Right.
But I do favor a good defense in the NFL, and I do think the Bears are going to be slightly better than the Lions. I think they're going to be 7-9. They're going to miss the playoffs by a game or two, and Trubisky, this is going to be his last opportunity, and hopefully they'll draft somebody or whoever bring in somebody, and we'll see how the future goes for the Chicago Bears.
There you go. And the last team in the NFC North, and we'll kind of lump this in with our feature story regarding Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. It's an interesting question in Green Bay because I feel like Green Bay kind of had an opportunity to go out and get some weapons for Aaron Rodgers. You're talking about a guy who's going into his late 30s. He's been in the league for quite a while after he came out of Cal and everything. And I felt like Green Bay had an opportunity to give him some weapons, give him somebody to throw to, give him an option on offense. And what did Green Bay do this year in the draft? Jordan Love out of Utah State at 26 overall. It's exactly what Aaron Rodgers didn't need going into this season. And I'm going to be Go ahead.
Oh, I don't mean to interrupt you there. For people who don't know, Jordan Love is a quarterback, so they're essentially drafting the replacement for Aaron Rodgers.
Yes, correct. And I'm going to be very critical of Green Bay because I'm not necessarily a huge believer in Aaron Rodgers. Some people say Aaron Rodgers is a better quarterback than Tom Brady, and I just kind of laugh at that. I think that's a stretch. But Aaron Rodgers is a very, very talented football player. And you're coming up on the end of his career within, I'd say, just a handful of years. He's at the tail end of his career. He's won one Super Bowl. And some people argue that he's one of the best quarterbacks of all time. Some people are so high on Aaron Rodgers. And so you would think that the Packers would go out and get him some weapons to try to go all in and say, you know what? Our window is closing with Aaron Rodgers. We need to go out and load up on talent and load up on pieces. If we're going to win, we need to be in a win now mode. But the Packers didn't do that. Like you said, they drafted quarterback Jordan Love, 26 overall. So the Packers didn't do that. They didn't go out and get those weapons for Aaron Rodgers. And so I have the Packers at 11-5, which I think is a ceiling for them. I think 10-6 is probably even more likely than 11-5, but I do have them at 11-5. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Aaron Rodgers this season. I just don't think he has enough pieces. He'll finish slightly ahead of the Vikings, in my opinion, but I just don't think he has enough to contend in the NFC as a whole.
To piggyback on what you had said as far as what the Packers didn't do and give him weapons, the idea, and this is reports from many people inside the Packers organization, is that they had intentions of drafting a receiver out of Arizona State named Brandon Ayuk, who actually got drafted by the 49ers right before the Packers. And instead of looking as far as like next best weapon available, they obviously planned for the future in Jordan Love, which, okay, I understand it. Aaron Rodgers is 36. He's about to be 37 in December. Yeah. You have to think the guy's got 2 to 3 more years of being an elite quarterback if he doesn't get hurt. And even then, Father Time might get him. You never know. So the window is now. This is your chance. And it's very evident that they're one big weapon away from really being a dynamic offense. The defense is good enough to get them through games. But they just, like you mentioned, they just kind of took the easy way out. Like, oh man, like, well, the guy that we kind of really wanted is gone. So, like, let's not risk it. Let's just play it safe and play for the future here. The Packers are a good team, and they're always consistently good. I think that their coach is decent, taking over for Mike McCarthy. He had a really good season one, even though they got murdered by the 49ers in the playoffs in Green Bay, if I can remember. I think it was in Green. No, wait, was it?
No, it was in San Francisco.
Yeah, it was in San Francisco. That's right. But be that as it may, San Francisco smoked Green Bay. There was never even a game.
Yeah, it was ugly.
I think they're going to be good still. I have them at 10-6. 11-5, I think, is a little too ambitious, especially with that missing playmaker on offense that's not Aaron Rodgers. I don't know who's going to win that division yet. I have the Vikings and the Packers both at 10-6. I don't really know how that's going to break down, if one of those two teams is going to beat the other one twice, or if it's going to come down to a division tiebreaker. We'll have to wait and see. But I do think that both those teams will make the playoffs. Obviously, one is a division champion and the other as a wild card.
Okay. And so going into a new division now, the NFC South will lead off with the New Orleans Saints. And what more can you say about the Saints? I mean, the Saints have proven time and time again they're one of the most explosive offenses in all of football. Michael Thomas, I mean, maybe the best receiver in all of the league. In my opinion, I think he is. And, you know, you have a great running back, obviously Drew Brees. He throws the ball 50 times a game. So I think he's going to make all the plays for New Orleans. They play in a decent division. I don't think it's a great division. I don't think it's a terrible division like the NFC East. But I do have the Saints at 12-4. And I will preface that with, I would not be surprised at all if the Saints even went 13-3.
I do have the Saints at 13-3. I think this is the best team on paper outside of the Kansas City Chiefs. I know there's going to be a lot of hub and flack for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with all the additions that they've made, which we'll get here in just a second. The rest of the division, the Falcons and the Panthers, in my opinion, is not good. So those are easy wins as far as the Saints, you know, it's when they match up with them. Like Koenig mentioned, Drew Brees, Thomas, Alvin Kamara, they're running back. There's just so many weapons on offense. The defense is rock solid. Not the best defense in the league, but definitely top 10, which when you have an offense that's so good, that's all you really need. I say 13-3. I would maybe pick it a little bit higher if the Buccaneers didn't add as much as they did. I think that 13-3 is going to win the division for the Saints. And who knows what they'll do in the playoffs, because the Saints just always seem to find a way to mess up their playoff hopes. Recently, at least. I mean, they do have a Super Bowl under Brees, obviously, but 13-3 Saints, mark it down.
There you go. So we'll move into the Carolina Panthers now, and Carolina's tough because Christian McCaffrey, phenomenal player, obviously the best running back in all of football, in my opinion. He does it all. He runs the ball, he catches the ball, he runs after the catch, he can do everything. He's a phenomenal player. I've got the Panthers at 4-12. I'm very low on the Panthers this year.
That's exactly where I have the Panthers. This is freaky. I have the Panthers right at 4-12. I mean, now, albeit people at home, it's a 16-game season, so to be within a game or two is not like mind-boggling. I mean, we're within a limited range here, so don't think that we were conspiring here. And if you do, then I don't really care. So
then you'd be dead wrong.
Yeah. The Panthers, the way that I see it, you have a brand new quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater, who I think is a very good player. But new system, new coach, a coach who's never coached in the NFL before. He's coming from the college ranks, which not necessarily a bad thing. But I think the NFL is a whole different monster, a whole different breed. They're going to have to play teams like the Saints twice, like the Bucks twice. I don't think they favor very well against either of those teams. There's going to be some growing pains in Carolina. When Ron Rivera left, I think he kind of knew that was a burning ship and it was going down, and Matt Rule, the new coach, was brought in to repair this team and kind of build it from the ashes, much like he did at Baylor, which, you know, college ranks. So I wish him luck, and he's got a tough job, and I just don't think you should expect great results right away, but hopefully the future for the Panthers goes up.
Moving on to the Atlanta Falcons, and this is such a weird team for me, and we'll kind of get into this in a little bit regarding what happened to the Falcons. It seems like ever since that Super Bowl against the Patriots where they blew that 28-3 lead late in the third quarter, like Atlanta has not been anywhere near that level ever since then. So weird. But the Falcons, I have them at 8-8, and like realistically, they could be even lower than that. They could be a lot lower than that. But I am a huge believer in Julio Jones, obviously. Matt Ryan, not the best quarterback. I think he can make enough plays to get Julio the ball. Julio Jones can just about outjump anybody, it seems like. And so he just has to get it in his general vicinity and he'll make some plays. I think 8-8, again, a ceiling could be a lot lower, maybe even as low as like 6-10, but that's where I've got the Falcons.
Oof, I have the Falcons considerably lower than 8-8. I have the Falcons at 4-12.
Wow, way lower.
I am just not a believer in the Falcons. Yes, you have Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, which is a great tandem. That's the only thing that I can think of that's worth a lick on this team. Again, I have to look to the division. They have to play the Saints twice, the Bucks twice. That's 0-4 right there in my book. I honestly think that the Panthers could probably split with them. So that's 1-5 right there going into the rest of their schedule. Like you said, from the halftime at the Super Bowl until now, they've been an absolute disaster. And they've given me no reason to be optimistic about them since then. So until they show me something, I just cannot get behind the Falcons. I think it's going to be a rough year. 4-12. That might be a little aggressively low, but that's where I'm at.
I'll give him Calvin Ridley also. I know, you talk about Matt Ryan, Julio Jones. I honestly think that Calvin Ridley is like the future face of that team. He's a speed threat. He can stretch the field. I think he's a phenomenal wide receiver. So I think maybe we don't give enough credit to Calvin Ridley. He's coming off actually a very good season last year.
I will say that Ridley is a fine receiver.
Yes. So going into our feature story in the NFC South and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we talked about this a little bit on last week's show. If you haven't seen it yet, you can rewind and catch it on Spotify for our take on the Bucs. We will kind of go briefly into it. The main question is, can Tom Brady win in a new system? Can he win in Tampa Bay? You've got a much better receiving core. You got Mike Evans, who probably has the best quarterback he's ever played with, and he's already been a phenomenal receiver in this league. And now you're giving him an actual quarterback. They added LaShawn McCoy in the offseason. They added Leonard Fournette. You've got Chris Godwin in that system, who's going to take over that slot wide receiver position. Gronk, obviously, as much as I think Gronk is kind of a bozo, like some people say Gronk is one of the best tight ends ever. So Tampa Bay is loading up on pieces, it seems like. And my main question with Tampa Bay is their defense. I'm not necessarily totally bought in on the fact that Tampa Bay's defense is any good, but their offense, I think, is going to be very exciting, very explosive, very fun to watch. I think Tampa Bay is going to go 10-6. And I'm hopeful as a Patriots fan and as a Tom Brady believer. I do think Brady, the player, can make it in a new system. I hope he can, right? I don't want the haters to say, well, he only won because of Belichick and his system, and he's a system quarterback. He was only successful because of that offense and the system he was placed in. That's like the disaster that I don't want to happen, obviously, because I'm a believer. Corbin, I know that you're maybe not as much of a believer, so I'll be interested to hear your perspective.
I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers finishing this season at 10-6.
This is crazy.
Here's my opinion on Brady, and I think most reasonable people would agree with me. Brady doesn't have to prove shit. If he comes out and he plays terrible, guess what? The dude's fucking 43 years old, playing on a new team in a new system after he's been at the same team for forever. If the dude comes out and his arm falls off, okay, he's 43. Like, that's to be expected. The fact that these people are like, oh, I need Tom Brady to go out there and win 14 games or else his whole career is discredited. Are you fucking kidding me? Did people say to Brett Favre when he was on the Vikings and the Jets, oh, if you don't win Super Bowls, your whole career is down the drain? No.
Yeah.
It's absolutely ludicrous. All Tom Brady has to do for the Buccaneers to be successful as far as make the playoffs, I don't think they're going to win the division because the Saints are just so good.
Yeah.
is just do enough. And Tom Brady has proven in his career that he's one of the smartest quarterbacks to ever play the game. He understands defenses. He's a coach on the field, essentially. And he's going to get on people's cases when they're doing the wrong thing, which is what teams need, right? You need leaders, you need players to hold players accountable. He's got familiarity in Gronkowski, so he's going to have that safety net that he can throw to. He definitely has Evans and Godwin, who are tremendous receivers. I'm not so sold on Shady McCoy and Leonard Fournette because I think that there could be some really hard miles on those players, and that's how the Buccaneers kind of ended up getting them. So we'll see kind of how they pan out and if they have the longevity to last a full season. I think 10-6 is more than fair, especially in this division. Yes, the Saints are going to be very, very tough. I do think the Buccaneers are going to lose to the Saints both times.
Yeah, I do.
But they're going to sweep the Falcons. They're going to sweep the Panthers. And to win 6 more games the rest of the season from there, that's totally attainable. And that's coming from a Jets fan too. So the fact that I'm giving credit to Tom Brady just shows that I have sympathy for the guy, for people who think he's got to be fucking Superman at 43 years old.
And I think it's more than fair. And I think if you ask any Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, even if Tampa Bay were to make the playoffs, I think most Bucs fans would be over the fucking moon if that were to happen with how bad they've been the last few years. So it kind of depends on how you define success, and it's all relative, right? Because in Foxborough, it was Super Bowl or bust. It's like, well, if you don't win a fucking Super Bowl, it's a lost season. You know, that's just the expectation that Belichick has in there. And I think it's a much different expectation in Tampa. It's, can Tom turn this team around to the point where they're at least competitive? And if they were to make the playoffs, and I think they will as a wild card team, like Corbin said, I don't think that they have enough to catch the Saints, who are just a fucking juggernaut. But I do think they have enough to catch a wild card. And I think if you were to ask any Bucs fan, that would be enough to solidify the fact that Brady is the guy. He's the GOAT. If he could turn that team around, I think it'd be a success. So we will talk about the last division in football. This is, I think, the most competitive division in the entire league, in the NFC West. I will start up here with the Seattle Seahawks. I am now a local in Seattle, in the local market. And obviously, the fan base up here is very high on the Seahawks. It seems like sometimes even irrationally so. The 12th man up here, they feel like the Seahawks are probably the best team in football, it seems like, if you listen to the local sports radio up here. But, you know, it's a tough division. Obviously, you've got the 49ers in there, defending NFC champions. The Cardinals made some splashes this offseason. The Rams are the Rams. You know, they went to a Super Bowl a couple years ago. So it's a very tough division. But Russell Wilson, you know, they added a few pieces on defense also. I think the Seahawks will finish at 11-5 and get a wild card.
Ooh. I have the Seahawks at 10-6. I think Russell Wilson is one of the most underrated players in football. Yes. I think Pete Carroll is a very underrated coach himself. That division, I think they're better than the Rams. They're definitely better than the Cardinals, in my opinion. Yeah. Are they as good as the 49ers? I could see them splitting a series with the 49ers. I could see them winning in Seattle and then dropping one in San Francisco.
Yeah.
I have faith in Russell Wilson. He's a smart quarterback. He's a safe quarterback. He doesn't turn the ball over. He doesn't put himself in danger. I'll take the experience at the quarterback position. The team in the last decade has had a lot of great success. I like the direction that Seattle is in and has been on. I think 10-6 is favorable, and I think that'll be a wild card spot.
Yeah. And so now we will talk about the Arizona Cardinals. And Arizona Cardinals' notable move this offseason, obviously DeAndre Hopkins. It was the big move that we talked about earlier in the show with the Houston Texans. And talking about Kyler Murray going into a new season with now actually a decent threat at wide receiver. I don't think the Cardinals had anybody halfway decent to throw to
Larry
for Kyler.
Larry Fitzgerald.
Well, yeah, sure. Larry Fitzgerald is reliable, but I don't think he's necessarily like a guy who stretches the field. Larry Fitzgerald, I mean, he makes all the catches, right? You throw the ball anywhere in Larry's general direction, he's going to catch the football. So he's reliable, which is nice. But I think Hopkins kind of gives you that more vertical threat that can kind of stretch the field a little bit more, which kind of opens up the game a little bit for Kyler Murray and for him to make plays and use his legs a little more. I'm obviously high on Chandler Jones, former Patriot, playing on the defensive end for the Cardinals now. I think he's a very underrated defensive player. I'd see the Cardinals as being very average. It seems like they are every year, but I have the Cardinals at 9-7.
9? You have the Cardinals as 9-7?
9-7. I have the Cardinals ahead of the Los Angeles Rams, by the way. But Corbin, I know that was a shock to you. What are your thoughts on the Arizona Cardinals?
Oh, not 9-7. I'll tell you that. I have the Cardinals at 6-10, and reason being, yes, they added Hopkins, who's a total stud, but Larry Fitzgerald's a year older. Larry Fitzgerald is a possession receiver now. If you need a guy to get you a 5-yard little curl route, okay, Larry is your man. And he's got great hands, and he's smart. He's a good teammate, but other than that, doesn't have a whole lot of value, in my opinion. Cardinal fans would throw me through the roof if they heard me say that, because I think he's a god here.
Yeah.
Running game has a huge question mark in it. They don't have an established running back as far as a number one. Kenyon Drake, he had some success last year, but going back to his Miami career, didn't have that sustained success. Their defense has holes in it. Yes, there's some big name players on that defense, like you mentioned, like a Chandler Jones, but there's also a lot of drama on this team with Patrick Peterson. I mean, all of last season and the season before that, he was essentially telling people he wanted to be traded, and then, oh, no, I don't want to be traded. I want to be a Cardinal. Oh, I don't want to be a Cardinal. Who knows what's going on with him? He's lost a step. He's definitely not the same player that he was 2-3 years ago when he was one of the best shutdown corners in the league. Yes, they got Budda Baker in the secondary, who is probably their best defensive player minus Chandler Jones, but there's a whole lot of holes in that defense. Opposite corner position, linebacker position, free safety, especially when you're in a division with teams like, we know the Rams have the power to put up points. We know the 49ers can score. We know the Seahawks can score. I just think that the Cardinals, there's just a lot of building blocks that still need to be in place before that they can really thrive in this division. I think 6-10 is kind of where we're looking at.
Wow. Okay, so San Francisco, going on to the next team in the NFC West. San Francisco 49ers, obviously defending NFC champions. I do have them as the favorite going into this year in that division. It seems like they added a few pieces in the offseason as well. They got a few more weapons for Garoppolo to throw to. So 49ers, obviously, they've got a great defense. Also, you're talking about Nick Bosa, who I think is their best defensive player. I think he kind of sets the table for the 49ers, and I feel like that team is really led by their defense. You know, Richard Sherman in the secondary also. Granted, I think Richard Sherman has also lost a step since he was with Seattle too. But the team is led by their defense. Jimmy Garoppolo is very much a game manager. He does enough to kind of keep your team in the game. He's got enough weapons around him. You're talking about Raheem Mostert, you know, their running back, who's a phenomenal player. They've added a few players at receiver, like I said before. So it makes Jimmy's job a little bit easier. All he has to do is not lose the game. And I think the defense is strong enough in San Francisco to win them games. Even if Garoppolo has a bad game, I think that 49ers defense can win them games. There's a couple games on their schedule that I think they'll win specifically because of their defense. But I do have the 49ers at 12-4.
Is there a broken record playing in here somewhere? Can somebody turn that off, please? I have them at 12-4 exactly. Rock solid team. I think they're going to have a few hiccups in their season. I think they're going to have issues with potentially teams like the Seahawks, maybe even the Rams. They're going to win the division. They're just too solid all around to not play as well as they did last year. I mean, for hell, they went to the Super Bowl and they had opportunities in the Super Bowl to win the Super Bowl.
They should have won the Super Bowl. They pissed that away. Kyle Shanahan looking at you again.
Well, Garoppolo had a throw down the field. You'll have to forgive me on the receiver's name, but he had a guy open for a touchdown pass that he had overthrown, which would have given them the lead and the momentum going into like the third or fourth quarter. So be that as it may, it's a lot easier to look at these things 2020, hindsight that is. 12-4, I think the Niners are going to be rock solid again this year. Definitely a tough team for anybody to play. One of the best teams in the NFC behind the Saints. So
I do want to say one more thing about Kyle Shanahan. I know I talked about this and I kind of threw him under the bus, but the 49ers, realistically speaking, if they had a decent offensive coordinator, they would have won the Super Bowl. And Kyle Shanahan, I'm pointing the finger at you because, yes, Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator of the Atlanta Falcons during their Super Bowl against the Patriots when they're up 28-3 late in the third quarter. And what did Kyle Shanahan do? He got away from the running game, which was very effective against the Patriots in that Super Bowl. They threw the ball. Dante Hightower got in and forced a fumble because they're throwing the football. They're throwing incompletions. The clock is stopping. They're allowing the team to get back into the game. And it was like watching the same thing that happened last year against Kansas City. San Francisco has a lead late in that Super Bowl, and what does fucking Kyle Shanahan do? He gets away from what worked the entire fucking game, and they continued to throw the ball and throw incompletions, and Kansas City took over, and they got back in the game, and they got all the momentum. Kyle Shanahan, you're a fucking bozo. The fact that you have a job is unreal. But anyways, I digress.
I mean, the guy was in 2 Super Bowls. I don't think you should knock the fact that he's at a job. Has he made mistakes? Perhaps, but hindsight is 2020 on these situations. It's very easy for us to pin back our ears and dissect the shit out of what people have done in the past. But the point being, I think the 49ers are going to be good this year.
Yeah. So we will go into the last team in the NFC West. This is the Los Angeles Rams going into their new stadium, SoFi Stadium. The big offseason acquisition, I think, in Los Angeles, you're talking about Jalen Ramsey picking up a 5-year, $105 million contract, making him the highest paid corner in the history of the NFL. The defense, they're loading up on a lot of pieces. The defense, they seem to be just trying to get even better. Aaron Donald is obviously a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, as he is every year. I mean, he's a phenomenal player. You just picked up Ramsey. Obviously, they had him last year, but now they've inked him to a long-term deal, etc., etc. I don't have a lot of faith in the Los Angeles Rams offensively. I think the defense is very good, and I think the defense will be very good, but I'm not a Jared Goff believer. I hate to go back to the Patriots, but since they were in that Super Bowl against the Patriots where Jared Goff was exposed as a phony and they scored only 3 points in that game, they haven't been the same team since then. Well, and granted, it's only been 2 years, but the 2 years removed from the Super Bowl, the Los Angeles Rams haven't been nearly as good. Everyone was talking about Sean McVay and how fantastic he was of a mastermind coach, but the Los Angeles Rams haven't done anything since that Super Bowl. So I have them at 8-8 going into this year.
Wouldn't you believe it? I also have the Rams as 8-8. The thing about the Rams, and I don't think they're ever going to be back to where they were when they went to the Super Bowl, when everybody was all on their business, that they was the next big thing. McVay is this genius, and all these new teams need to go out and find these young gurus, kind of like the Cardinals tried to do with Cliff Kingsbury. The problem with the Rams, in my eyes, is they're top heavy. And what I mean by that is they have 3 players that are making gobs and gobs of money that are eating their payroll away. You've got Jared Goff, who might not even be as good as people thought he was.
He's overpaid.
Who has a massive contract. You've got Aaron Donald, and now you've got Jalen Ramsey. So you've got 3 players making massive amounts of money for this team. Now, albeit, I think Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey are terrific players, and I'm not saying that they don't deserve that money. But when you've got the salary is going to 3 players, you don't have the money to build other areas of your team. And I think the Rams are now figuring this out. The Rams, when they were having their success, still had Jared Goff on a rookie contract. They didn't have to worry about that. They were able to go get players to fill those voids in the meantime. And now, after they give Jared Goff this massive deal, you're seeing the repercussions. They had their window with the talent that they had. They didn't get it done. Now they don't have that talent anymore because they can't afford it. And last year is a prime example. I still think they're an okay enough team, but there's no way they're going to contend against a team like the 49ers or even the Seahawks for that matter, because they're top heavy. And when you're top heavy, you tip over. The Rams, you screwed yourselves.
So that is our wrap up of all the divisions in football. We hope you enjoyed that. We do have a quick fire lightning round, and we won't spend too much time on this. You know where our stances are on each of the teams. We wanted to name our favorite out of the NFC and out of the AFC and who we think is going to go into the Super Bowl. Out of the NFC, I'm high on the Saints. Like I said before, I think they've got all the players. They've come up short in recent years. They've kind of shot themselves in the foot. But in a season like this, where I think Drew Brees' window of opportunity is closing, I think everybody knows that. Hopefully for Brees, he gets another opportunity to play in a Super Bowl. I do have the Saints coming out of the NFC. Out of the AFC, I do think it is a little bit of a revenge tour for the Baltimore Ravens this year. Believe it or not, I do have the Ravens coming out of the AFC. I think there was a bit of a letdown when they lost to Tennessee. I think they wish that they would have had an opportunity to play against the Chiefs. And I think, they've got a lot of competitive players on that team who want that shot at the Chiefs. I think they want to beat the best to prove that they're the best team. And ultimately, I have the Ravens capturing the Super Bowl, finishing the job they couldn't do last year and getting the job done for Lamar, who I think is a phenomenal player. So, Corbin, what are your thoughts on the champions for the year?
How I have it shaped out, very interesting as far as your picks, if I may add. As far as the NFC goes, I am going to take a big wild card gamble here. I am going to go as far as the NFC champions, the Minnesota Vikings.
Wow.
Now, I think the easy bet is to say the New Orleans Saints, and that was my first instinct. But the problem with the Saints is their Achilles heel. If you stop their offense, you stop the Saints. And I think the Vikings are one of the few teams in the NFC that has a defense that can play well enough to match the Saints. And they have an offense good enough to beat the Saints defense. Now, again, I'm going out on a limb here because why not? So I'm going to say Vikings out of the NFC, which is very ambitious, I will admit.
Yes.
And I can't pick against the Chiefs. I mean, yes, they have issues they need to improve on, but they're so much smaller compared to other teams that I just cannot take away from them. I think that they're a better team than the Ravens are, albeit the Ravens are a very good team. And I would say that the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl again, back-to-back champions, Chiefs over Vikings. That's my prediction.
All right. So we will see how the season plays out. I know that Corbin and I are going to keep our notes from this episode and kind of go back at the end of the year to kind of see how we fared. But we will go into everyone's favorite segment of the show. We will go into the unknown.
The unknown.
And this week, I am in charge of the unknown. And like I said from the beginning of the show, we're going full on NFL theme this week. And so I've got a little bit of a wager for Corbin, like always. These are 5 questions, and this is specifically going to be about NFL records. And it's going to be NFL records with short lists, where there's only maybe a couple of players that can be on this list.
Oh, God.
And so I'm going to give him the questions. Oftentimes, I'll name 1 or 2 if there are 3 players on the list. And I want him to give me the other player who's in that category as the only player in NFL history to accomplish that feat. The questions are pretty tough. But I think that Corbin is really well versed in football, and so I think if he can kind of like rationalize his way through the questions and kind of just think about it with the information that I give him, I think he'll be able to do okay here. I've got 5 questions. I'm willing to say if he can get 2 right out of the 5, we'll push and we'll both drink. If he can only get 1 out of the 5, I think that he could owe a shot or a beer or whatever. And then if he gets 3 right out of the 5, which I think is very fair, then I will owe a shot on my end.
Deal. Let's do it.
Okay. Question number 1. In 2019, Christian McCaffrey became the 3rd player in NFL history with 1,000 rushing yards and 1,000 receiving yards in a single season. Roger Craig also accomplished this feat in 1985. Who is the 3rd and final player in league history with 1,000 rushing yards and 1,000 receiving yards in a single season?
I have 2 players in mind, so this is and I could totally be wrong. My instinctual guesses are Le'Veon Bell and LaDainian Tomlinson. Bell makes more sense to me because I know how. So this is just for one season. Say it again. The stats. I'm sorry.
It's 1,000 rushing yards and 1,000 receiving yards in one season.
Can I get any clues whatsoever? Like this isn't some player who played in like the 1950s, is it?
No,
Like-
it's recent memory. It's a player that was in the league during our lifetime.
Okay. Oh Jesus! I honestly think it's one of those two. I just don't know who it is. I'm gonna say Le'Veon Bell. Final answer.
Oh, that is incorrect. The answer we were looking for is Marshall Faulk.
Oh, fuck. Now that you say that, it kind of rings a little bit of a bell in the back of my mind. Fuck. Okay.
Very tough question.
I said Falk, not fuck. Falk.
Yeah. All right, so you're 0 for 1, but you do have 4 questions left to kind of, I think,
Damn.
in my opinion, that was the hardest question. So I led you off with the hardest one. I think they'll get a little bit easier from here. Are you ready for question number 2?
Yes.
Okay. In 2019, Nick Bosa became one of only 2 players in NFL history to have posted at least 9 sacks, 15 tackles for loss, and 25 quarterback hits in their rookie season. The second player accomplished this feat in 2012. Who is he? We're talking
stats.
defensive
stats again.
defensive players in their rookie season. So this player was a rookie in 2012 and he posted at least 9 sacks, 15 tackles for loss, and 25 quarterback hits.
This would have been right around the time that Vontaze Burfict came out of ASU and went to Cincinnati, and he had a really good rookie year. Oh, 2012. Who would have come out around that? See, here's the problem. I'm having a tough time. I also have like Ndamukong Suh running through my mind, but I don't know if 2012 is too late. 2012. Can you at least tell me if he's like a linebacker, defensive lineman?
Technically, he's a linebacker, and I'll even go one step further. He plays in the AFC.
He currently plays,
Yes.
and he currently plays in the AFC.
Yes.
So he's technically a linebacker.
Yes. That's all the clues I can give you without giving it away.
AFC. See, the problem is that like I'm like considerably drunk right now. So my thought, I'm trying to think about it, and then all I can think about is how drunk I am, which is just not good. AFC linebacker currently playing 2012. Oh, son of a. Just give me a minute. This episode's like 4 hours long already, but give me a minute here.
You're going to kick yourself when you don't get this one.
The fact that you say I'm going to kick myself makes me think it's a Jet player, but...
I'll give you a hint. It's not a Jets player.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to say Vontaze Burfict, and I know that's wrong, but I just can't think of anything else right now. That's my guess.
The correct answer we were looking for is Von Miller.
Oh!
Yeah.
Damn it. Shit.
Yes.
Okay.
It's one of those that, like, once you hear the answer, it totally makes sense, but it's very hard to come up with that answer.
Yeah, well, the problem is I'm usually pretty good with dates and players, but I am drunk right now. So,
Yes.
like, correlating, like, 2012 with, just rookies. That was 8 years ago. I mean,
Yeah.
shit, like, it's Von Miller's been in the league for 8 years, but, like, he could have been in the year for 7 years or 9 years. So that was tough.
Okay. Question number 3. You can still win this if you get all 3 of these, and you've pulled off comebacks in weeks past, so I'm willing to keep the faith. I think you'll get at least 2 of these next 3. I have confidence in you.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Question number 3. Only 2 quarterbacks in NFL history have multiple games with a perfect passer rating in a single season. George Blanda accomplished this feat in 1968. The other AFC quarterback did this in 2007. Who is he?
A perfect passer rating.
In multiple games.
Wait, you said season.
Yes. 2 games in a single season.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said that they had, like, for the entire season, they had a perfect passer rating.
No. So they had multiple games with a perfect passer rating in a single season.
2007?
Yes.
AFC. Oh, God. In my mind, it can. Oh, fucking hey. Oh, I have 3 names in mind.
Sound it out.
I have Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, and Phillip Rivers. And 2007 was the year that the Patriots went 16-0, right? And then they ended up losing. Was that 2007? I think it was, right?
I'll give you a huge hint. It's none of those 3.
Oh, fucking hell. Okay. Well, that's. Oof. Okay.
I mean, that knocks out 3 teams out of the AFC.
And this, I can't imagine this guy's playing now. Can you give that hint or no?
He is playing now.
Like playing, or he's like on a roster?
He's playing. He's a starting quarterback. That's as much as I can give you.
Answer this if you can.
Okay.
So back then he was on an AFC team. Is he still on an AFC team?
Yes, he's actually on the same team.
Okay, I know the answer. At least I think I do. Ben Roethlisberger, final answer.
It is Ben Roethlisberger.
Yes!
All right. You're off the schneid.
So, because I'm pretty sure Eli Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers were all part of that same draft class. So it was all around that same time frame.
Right.
So when you told me it wasn't those other 3, I was like, it has to be Ben Roethlisberger. Like it has to be. Like so okay, that the clues helped me a lot. Otherwise, I would have gotten that wrong.
All right, so you got 1. You can still win if you get the next 2. I'll be fair. We'll push if you get one of the next 2, and then we'll both drink a little more.
Okay.
All right, question 4. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Only 3 quarterbacks in NFL history have scored 5 touchdowns in a single game during their rookie season. Fred Tarkenton achieved this in 1961. Deshaun Watson was the second in 2017. The third and final quarterback to achieve this did so during Week 16 of the 2019 season. Who is he?
Now, when you say 5 touchdowns, he could throw 5 touchdown passes.
Scored 5 touchdowns. So they could throw for 5, they could run for 5, or a combination of those. Yeah.
As a rookie.
As a rookie, yes.
In 2019.
Last year, correct.
This last season that just happened.
Yes.
I think I know it, but I have to go through it in my mind. I think, this is not my answer. I think it's Daniel Jones. I don't think Kyler Murray ever had a 5 touchdown game, but I could be totally wrong. I'm just trying to think of rookies last year. Kyler Murray, Daniel Jones. Oh, no, wait. Yeah, Kyler Murray was a rookie last year, right? Yes, he was. I'm drunk. I think it's Daniel Jones, and it's, oh my God, if it's Kyler Murray, I'm going to be fucking embarrassed, but I'm pretty certain it's Daniel Jones, final answer.
It is Daniel Jones.
Yes!
Daniel Jones actually threw for all 5 of those touchdowns against, I think it was the Washington Redskins at the time.
You mean the Washington football team?
Of course. Okay, so as of right now, we're in a draw. Corbin has gotten the 2 requirements for me to drink as well as himself, so at least you're, in the same boat as me. This last question will decide it. I love when it comes down to the last question.
Ooh.
Are you ready for the 5th and final question?
Oh, yeah.
In 2019, Michael Thomas broke the NFL record for most receptions in a single season with 149. In doing so, he passed the long-standing record of 143 set by this receiver during the 2002 season.
I'm pretty confident it's Marvin Harrison. I'm somewhat confident it's Marvin Harrison. That name, as soon as you ask that question, that name just like, I'm not even going to think about it. Marvin Harrison, final answer. Oh, I think that's correct. He's going to the cupboard. Oh, well, he never admitted to that being the right answer, but he's getting out the Irish whiskey, so I think that's right.
Marvin Harrison is correct. I went to go get my bottle as usual, so congrats, man. You did really well on those last 3 questions. Granted, I did give you kind of a big hint with Big Ben, but that's okay.
Yeah, without the Big Ben clues, I would have guessed one of those original 3. So the fact that you took out all 3 of them gave me the right answer. But I was pretty confident on those last 2, the Daniel Jones and the Marvin Harrison.
Yeah, the last 2 you crushed. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But I'm a fair sport. You know, you did what you had to do. I'll drink my weekly shot of Jameson.
The first question was hard as fuck. I mean...
But, like, once you knew who it was, you were like, oh, well, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when we're drinking, and we had a really long show, too, so we drank a whole lot, too. Like, for how much we drink, we are in pretty good shape here, so... Oh, Koenig is loving that.
Not good.
Koenig, why don't you go ahead and run the people down as far as next week's show, what kind of topics we'll have on tap for them.
So we do have a whole lot coming. Before we get into the topics for next week's show, we kind of want to do a brief segment at the end of every show, kind of reviewing the drink of the evening. Like I said before, I had the Ziggy Zoggy Summer Lager out of Silver City Brewery in Bremerton, Washington. And pretty good. I'm a big fan of lagers, and this one's actually really refreshing. We'll go out of a 5-star rating. I'm not going to give it a 5 because I don't love it. But I'll give it a 4. I think it's very good. It's very nice. Corbin, how rate you your seltzers?
Yeah, so I mean, seltzers are a whole different breed. You've got your White Claws, your Trulies, I don't know, whatever else is out there. The Truly brand, I prefer White Claws over Trulies. Trulies, they taste a little bit more sweeter to me, and I don't like to have. It tastes like, not that there's sugar in here because there's not, but it tastes like kind of sugary. Maybe the flavoring, actually, there is sugar in here. There's 1 gram of total sugar, so maybe that's why it tastes sugary. It's okay. I prefer other options. Is 2.5 considered like average?
Yeah.
I give it 2.5. 2.5 out of 5 for a Truly. If you're looking for something light that's not going to weigh you down like a beer, I'd grab it, but I would prefer White Claws. Or even Corona seltzers are pretty good. There's better options.
All right. So there's our take on the beers and on the seltzers and everything like that. So we will sign off for the evening. More coming in our future episodes. This has been episode 8 of the show. The support has been phenomenal from our community. We continue to get great feedback from our listeners. So thank you guys so much for supporting the show and supporting us internet bozos just coming on here and talking up a few things. We are going to move into our post show, but next week's show, we will be talking about English Premier League soccer. Obviously, we didn't talk about that at all today. We wanted it to be specifically about the NFL. We hope you guys enjoyed it. We know it did go a lot longer than normal, but we hope you enjoyed the NFL coverage. We will have a whole lot more of that coverage coming. We will have a little bit of a wrap-up of the first week of the EPL season. What's going on with Sheffield United? They've got a game against Wolves coming up on Monday. They have a few signings that they made in the offseason that we'll talk about. We won't really bear you down with all the details with EPL, but we do want to cover it briefly each week because, believe it or not, the show was founded on English Premier League soccer. And so we're kind of learning the game. We're kind of learning the league. We think we've made a whole lot of strides that way, and it will be a topic going forward. So we hope you guys will join us on that road to learning everything about EPL. So we'll have that for you. We'll have NBA playoffs. Unfortunately, we couldn't cover that tonight. There's still a few series that are still wrapping up, but we will talk about the conference finals in next week's show. We'll also have a whole lot more coverage of the NHL playoffs. That will probably be into the Eastern Conference and Western Conference Finals as well at that point, and a whole lot more coming your way in future episodes. I have been your host, Koenig, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Corbin. Say goodnight to the people at home, Corbin.
To all my Swedes out there, good morning, and I hope you have a great day.
Good night, everyone.